And welcome back, footy fans. It's another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess, here, back with another player chat. And ladies and gentlemen, I have to say, this is so awesome. I, for the first time, have a WAFL player and my first men's player that I get to talk to. Joining me from Western Australia, Mr. Brandon Erceg, co-captain of the Swan Districts Footy Club. Brandon, thank you for joining me today.
No, pleasure to be here, Donnie. I'm looking forward to the chat.
Awesome, awesome. Unfortunately, in kind of some bad circumstances, you got injured over the last few weeks, and I know you're recovering. How is the recovery going, and how soon could we see you back on the footy field?
Yeah, it's a very slow and frustrating process, unfortunately. I'm still on crutches for just under a week, and it's been a month already. So yeah, it's pretty frustrating, as you could imagine. In terms of when I could come back, yeah, it's sort of this season's looking unlikely. But I suppose you never know with how quickly or how well you could respond to rehab. So yeah, I'm just sort of ticking off. I'm aiming on ticking off each step as it comes, and not focusing too much on an exact date. So we'll just tackle it from there.
Well, hope for a speedy recovery for you, sir. But let's have a fun chat about footy. I cannot wait, being my first W waffle player hopping on the podcast. So really quickly, we talked a little bit of footy. Let's step outside the footy box for a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself outside of the game of football?
Yeah. So I mean, I obviously grew up in Western Australia, actually in a country town, initially 900 kilometers north of Perth, which I've still got some family living there. And essentially, yeah, grew up in Perth, and living and breathing footy once I moved down from that country town. But at the moment, in terms of work, because obviously we have to work full time, I'm actually working in procurement as a specialist for Fortescue Metals Group, so in the mining industry. So I previously worked at a company called Alcoa, which is actually an American-based company, in procurement as well, which I started doing after I graduated from university. Um, and yeah, now I'm at Fortescue, and I have got a house with a partner and two dogs, who hopefully they don't interrupt this podcast at any stage. But apologies in advance if you hear any barking or anything like that. But yeah, so essentially that's sort of me in a nutshell, away from footy. And yeah, obviously I'm pretty close and have got a pretty broad family and friend network, being of Croatian heritage. It's a pretty big family. So yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. And the podcast is pet friendly. I've had cats walk across, I've had dogs hop on a bed in the background, so it's not a problem. I've had it
Good to
happen
hear.
before, so no issues at all. So being born and raised in WA, which is footy mad, I must ask this. What is your earliest footy memory?
Yeah, so as I sort of touched on before, I grew up in that country town, which was, yeah, sort of north of Perth, and generally over here you'd start, well, most places in Australia you'd start footy at an Auskick level, which is sort of your 7 year olds, all the same age group, running around. But I think because of the population obviously being a bit smaller in a country town, there was no such thing as Auskick in Carnarvon, which is what the town was called. And you actually played what was called mini nippers, which ranged from, well, it was under 12s, but basically you had some kids who were sort of 9, 10, or 11. And I think, was so mad about footy that I managed to have my mum and dad allow me to sort of play in that mini nippers when I was, I think, 7 years old. So I was just running around. They were probably holding their breath that I wouldn't get hurt running around with some pretty big kids who were sort of 11 and 12 as a 7 year old. And yeah, just sort of loving it. And yeah, I suppose I sort of always had a footy in my hand, wherever I went, and would take every opportunity to be outside and just be kicking the footy, mostly to myself, to be honest, because people got sick of doing it with me after a while. So yeah, that would be my earliest memory. Yeah.
Fantastic. Love hearing that. And again, growing up over here and not having this awesome sport, it's cool to hear those awesome memories of being so young and having a footy in hand. So I ask this, you still have the luxury and the pleasure of continuing to play. Unfortunately, my playing career is long gone, unfortunately. It was short but sweet, I will say that. So, what is your favorite part about playing the sport of footy?
Oh, I think probably twofold. The sort of relationships that you develop and that you create. I think obviously having success is probably your biggest aim while you're playing, but you sort of create friendships for life out of playing footy at a footy club for so long. And even playing with guys when I was younger in junior ranks, I'm not necessarily close to them or in contact with them regularly, but if I ever see them out and about in Perth, you instantly are having a chat like you have been seeing each other every day. So you sort of have that connection, I suppose. And then the other part of it for me is just the competitiveness. I love running out on a Saturday with your teammates trying to achieve something against another team, against opposition, and not wanting to lose, and just the competitiveness that comes with the sport, I suppose. Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I know you're out in Perth, but I always ask this because I never like to assume because I've asked this question in an assumption and gotten a different answer than I expected. So, who is the club that you barrack for in the AFL and why?
Yeah, so West Coast Eagles, unfortunately, at the moment, with the way things are going. But
Not laughing
um,
at you, not laughing at you. I'm sorry.
yeah, no. I'm happy to cop it on the chin because it's probably deserved. And you have to cop it when you're not going well. But yeah, as to why, I think just most of my family sort of were supporting West Coast. A lot of them actually, funnily enough, used to support Collingwood. Because they had the same colours as Swan Districts, because the family grew up Swan District supporters.
Mhm.
And yeah, the irony in that is that they ended up hating Collingwood down the track, probably their most hated club. But yeah, I think when West Coast entered the competition, the family started supporting um, West Coast, being being the first WA team, and I naturally sort of followed suit and have been, yeah, probably the passion has dropped off a touch with playing for Swan Districts and being so involved there, because you obviously invested at that level in the WAFL competition. But yeah, absolutely passionate. Like used to paint my face when I went to West Coast Eagles games, because I think we've been members for about 20 odd years. So yeah, definitely a West Coast fan, even though we're not going too well at the moment. So not the best thing to admit.
There's nothing wrong with that. And again, I'm not laughing at it, but I'm gonna quick question without notice. Is there anybody in the family that has broken off and has become a Fremantle supporter? And if so,
Yeah,
how's the banter?
yeah, absolutely. So my uncle, my dad's brother, he's been a Fremantle supporter since I can remember, because he would have broken off and supported Freo when they entered the competition, and I was too young to remember him ever being an Eagles supporter, because it wouldn't have been very long while I was alive that he was an Eagles supporter. And yeah, he copped it. He has copped it for a very long time, especially I remember when we were younger. My other uncle and my auntie used to stir him up a fair bit, and even I would probably stir him up a fair bit, because obviously West Coast have had a bit more success than Fremantle over here in the two team towns. So yeah, I've got to say he's stuck to it. He's never wavered, so I give him that. And he's always been good fun with it. But yeah, he's copped a bit, I reckon, over the years for being a Freo supporter.
Well, I bet he's probably throwing it back nowadays over this last couple of years. He's probably giving it back with interest. So nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that. So we'll go back to it again. I always love this because again, West Coast does have a very rich history. Do you have a favorite player of the past who's donned the Eagles colors, and do you have a favorite player currently on the Eagles list?
Yeah, so my favourite players from the past growing up were probably Peter Matera and Glenn Jakovic. Peter Matera, myself and my brother used to have the VHS tape of the 1992 grand final, which obviously we were way too. I wasn't alive when it was on, but we would just school holidays up in Carnarvon, up in that town when we went back to visit family. We would watch that over and over again, and he obviously kicked 5 goals and won the Norm Smith medal that day. So uh, watched that over and over again a lot. So obviously liked him. And yeah, Glenn Jakovic, I don't know. I think because I ended up playing centre half back, and he played centre half back, and he's a strapping Croatian lad, so a bit of similarity there. And the current player, I probably ham this up a bit with the boys at the footy club, almost to the point where I'll say I've got a man crush on him, but probably just to play it up a little bit is definitely Tom Barrass at the moment. So I suppose the similarities in terms of position played, and he's a left footer. So a part of it's probably me watching exclusively him and Jeremy McGovern at Eagles games, and not necessarily watching what's happening in the overall game sometimes, and just developing a love for the way he goes about his footy. So yeah, he'd definitely be the current favourite.
Not a bad one to keep an eye on. Definitely one of the better players. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a lot of help right now with all of the injuries at West Coast. So we've done talked about everything. So we're going to come back to you a little bit, and I want to know this because, again, as you said, you moved down from the country town to Perth to pursue footy. How is it that you ended up at Swan Districts, besides the fact that your family's huge Swan District supporters?
Yeah, so it's funny because that country town is actually zoned to South Fremantle Footy Club, because obviously the way it works in WA is all the regional areas. Each WAFL club has a zone in terms of the regional areas. So yeah, if I had stayed in Carnarvon, I probably would have ended up at South Fremantle. But my dad's side of the family is from the Swan Valley in Perth. So when we moved to Perth, when I was about 8 or 9, we lived in that area of Perth, initially in the Swan Valley, and then we moved to Bassendean. So I think because of that, naturally, I started playing development squad footy for Bassendean. For Swan Districts, after playing junior footy at Bassendean, and it naturally evolved that way, where I ended up at the Swan Districts Footy Club. Yeah.
All of life is timing. That's absolutely fantastic. So we jump to this. I've asked this question to a few of the players, and I love it because I'm surprised that I've got a lot of team answers, but I wonder how you say this. What is your biggest accomplishment so far as a footballer?
Oh, yeah, that's a tricky one, really. Because it's hard because we haven't had a lot of success in terms of winning a premiership or anything like that at league level. That would be the obvious answer. I suppose for me, probably playing league footy. I had a few years off from footy altogether because of a few issues at one point. So I wasn't actually sure if WAFL footy was on the cards. So I think actually debuting and then having the opportunity to play at the club for so long is probably the biggest one. And I mean, to get to play in a final for the first time a couple of years ago was another one that stands out. We were awfully close to winning that game and winning that elimination final and progressing. So that was a pretty special moment as well. But I would say just debuting. Would add playing one game of WAFL footy would I would say is probably my biggest achievement to date. Yeah.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Not everybody gets a chance to don a WAFL jersey, so that's definitely an accomplishment. So I'm going to take you into the rooms for the next couple of questions on this. Do you have a best mate at the club, and who is it?
Oh, so I don't know if you want me to go down the path of player or just anyone at the club, but probably my best mate I'd have to say is Alex Howard, who retired in 2021, although he did try to make a mini comeback this year, which didn't go too well. But he's actually an assistant coach. He coaches the backline of all areas. So yeah, and he played in the backline. So we played together in the backline, and I sort of grew up with him. Went to high school with him. I've been mates with him for a long time. So I'd probably say Alex Howard. And in terms of players, I mean, I'm a pretty old boy in terms of the age of the group. So I would say a combination of Nathan Blakely, Braden Noble, and Tony Knott, all being older guys and guys that I've probably played with a bit longer and who have been at the club for a bit longer in the same time that I've been at the club. So yeah, I'd probably go with those guys.
Ain't nothing wrong with that. You gotta keep the old boys together. Not a problem with
That's right.
that. So I love this because each and every footy team is different, and sometimes footy teams are a group in different ways. So take me into the rooms. Describe to me the Swan District's Footy Club men's team. Are you a fun group? Are you a very business group? Is it very laid back? Kind of describe to me the boys in the room right now.
Yeah, I think it's probably the same at a lot of clubs, but you get a bit of a mix because obviously you've got a lot of different personalities in the group. So before a game, or at training in the change rooms, you'll see a mix of guys who like to keep it pretty light and have a bit of fun. And then they'll just switch on and be ready once the balls bounce. And then you have some guys who are ultra serious in terms of the way they approach it, and they have a sort of set routine and that kind of thing. So yeah, you probably get a bit of a mix. Overall, I would say that we're probably on the lighter side as a general group, if you had to say overall. But yeah, again, it really just depends on the different personalities.
Yeah, I mean, each group is different, and I kind of like again, each player that I've talked to, the room is always a little bit different. Sometimes they're very light, everybody's friends. Sometimes it's a group that, I mean, it's very business like. Everybody comes in, they get to their job, they're friends after, but when it comes to training, there's seriousness. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So as we were kind of discussing that as you kind of said at the start, that waffle players, like many of the state leagues, you have to work a full-time job. So I'm interested, how is kind of a typical training day for you? Because as you said, you work a full-time job. Kind of explain to me your a typical training day to me.
Yeah, so obviously the different we train 3 times a week during the season, leading into a game, and the day of the week will differ. Will change, I suppose, what you're doing. Obviously, early in the week on the Monday, it's typically a recovery. Then you'll have your main training session on a Tuesday, and sort of like a what we call like a captain's run or a lighter training on a Thursday, and team selection, etc. But I mean, for me, I try to get off of work and get to the football club as early as I can, because I will generally focus on spending some time before training, either um, doing some recovery type, rehab type stuff, or getting some treatment, or trying to get into the gym, to do a little bit of work in the gym prior to training, and then also having enough time to get out on the training track, and prepare for training for 10 or 15 minutes prior to us actually starting training as well. And then I mean, post training will also be a combination of either getting treatment, depending on how my body's feeling, and most of the time lately it's getting treatment rather than doing work in the gym, or getting work in the gym as well. But it's pretty yeah, I think for a lot of guys it's the same. Obviously, it varies depending on what you're doing. If you study, you've probably got a little bit more flexibility, and depending on your job, you might have a little bit more flexibility. But I know for a lot of guys, and for myself, it's sort of wake up in the morning, get ready, go to work. You sort of finish work, you're going straight to training, and then you're getting ready for training, doing maybe a little bit after training, going home, having a meal, and then probably getting ready to go to bed. So they are pretty they're pretty full on days, and I suppose you have to be pretty committed to it, and also fairly organized so that you can get the most out of the time that you have, because obviously you're a little bit limited in your time compared to if you had the opportunity to do it full time. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely understand. Unfortunately, we all don't have that. Y'all don't have the experiences of the AFL where you can just get up, go to the club, have a full entire day, and then have half the day off to just kind
I'd
of
love that.
fuck around. So, so, and then I know with the waffle is you don't have the travel experiences of the AFL, but kind of a typical game day at home. How early are you getting to the club? I mean, is it also kind of depending on whether you need treatment getting ready to the game, and then kind of how is your day when it comes to like a home game for you?
Yeah, so I actually at the moment I live down near Fremantle, which is obviously a fair way away from Basildine. But typically, I like to sort of get up and take it pretty easy. I get the local newspaper delivered to home just on a Saturday. So I do enjoy walking up the driveway and grabbing the newspaper and coming back and having a bit of a read of the newspaper, a bit of a coffee and sort of a meal like breakfast, I suppose, on game day. And then generally I'll take our dogs out for a bit of exercise and a bit of a walk and sort of maybe take the footy with me. And that's a way to sort of stretch the legs. And then it'll just be, again, coming home, maybe doing a little bit of stretching, but also taking it fairly easy. I like to be pretty relaxed before I head to the ground so that you're not sort of wasting too much energy mentally on the game before you have to play it. And then, yeah, would generally arrive at a game about 2 to 2.5 hours prior. We sort of, I think, aim to get there by latest an hour 45 prior to the game because we have team meetings, etc. But yeah, I'll generally try to stretch the legs again at quarter time of the game before us, when the reserves are playing, and also get a bit of treatment as part of the reason why I try to get there a touch earlier as well. And then, yeah, once you sort of tick those things off, you have your team meetings and you start to focus on what you have to do and start to get ready for the game, get yourself physically ready, I suppose, warmed up and that kind of thing as well. And then you're into it. Yeah.
Sounds like a fun day for sure. So I'm interested on this. As you kind of said, you're a defender. So when you go to the game, say you watch Barras and Jeremy McGovern. So, but is there a player that you kind of modeled your game after?
Yeah. So obviously playing WAFL footy, and I was also a big follower of Swan Districts when I was younger, like coming through, I suppose, as a teenager. So they were pretty successful around the time that I was starting to play development squad footy at the club. They won that premiership in 2010. I was actually playing Colts at the time. And even before, a couple of years before that, they made a grand final. So I used to watch Justin Simpson a lot in the WAFL, who's also played in the back line by the time I was coming up, and is a left footer as well, and used to try and look at the way he went about it. And also Talon Ames, who was a fullback for a long time, a very good fullback, and I think he's in the top 5 games played for Swan Districts as well. And then the other one is Tony Knott, who is still currently playing, and he's an absolute gun, and a special person, that man. In terms of the AFL, I'm trying to think who I modeled my game on. There's no one that really sticks out. Like, I mean, around the time I was starting to try and play WAFL League footy or debuted, it probably was Jeremy McGovern still by that time, and Eric McKenzie was probably another one playing for the Eagles. But I suppose not long after I started playing footy for Swan Districts, there was a bit of a transition in terms of the way defenders played, from being a typical or traditional defensive stopper who would spoil and just try to stop their man purely, and a move towards being an intercepting defender. So I think, that still sort of ties into trying to model the game around what McGovern and Barras sort of do or were doing at the time, or starting to do at the time, probably particularly McGovern, to try and be a little bit more aggressive as a defender and learn to play that way.
Yeah, hey, nothing to sniff at there. Absolutely some great choices there, and some players that on their day can be absolutely outstanding. So absolutely love that. So as you said, you've played WAFL, and I know there's been some really good players that have come through. Can you think of your toughest opponent that you've ever played against?
Yeah, so a lot of opponents felt really tough early on when I first started playing and was probably still trying to find my feet. I remember there were guys like, there was a guy named Hamish Shepherd who used to play from Subiaco, and he might have been on an AFL list at one point as well. He wasn't around for very long. He might have only been in the WAFL for a year or two early on when I first started playing league, but he was a handful for a guy who was trying to work out, like myself, who was trying to work out how to sort of play the game. And when you come up against a decent player, yeah, you can find it pretty tough. In terms of guys who have been around for a bit longer, over the duration that I've played, one that has always been a good challenge, but mind you, he plays in the midfield a lot more for Peel Thunder now, is Blair Bell. He played as a forward a lot more earlier, up until probably the last couple of years, and he was always a handful. And then another one, I haven't played on him directly as much in recent years, probably played on him a little bit more directly earlier on, and maybe before he hit his absolute peak, but there was still some good battles, is Ben Sokol, who plays for Subiaco, and he might even be leading the goal kicking in the competition this season as well. And the other one I'll mention, again, I probably played on him more directly before he hit his absolute peak, but Tyler Keitel has always had the potential to be a very dangerous forward for West Perth as well.
Yeah, definitely some good ones there, and some never. I don't mean to bring up some evil memories on that sometimes, because sometimes those guys can give defenders nightmares. So,
Yeah,
and we'll go to this. I mean, again, we're kind of halfway through the season, but unfortunately for the Swan Districts, I know discussing with Rick Gauchi for the waffle things, this has been a season of almost for Swan Districts. Your thoughts so far on your teams this year, because you guys have been snake bitten with so many close games that just seem to always find a way to go the other way besides getting W's.
yeah, it's obviously been like you said, an extremely frustrating season to date. I think if we had have kicked 4 or 5 more goals total, we could be sitting second or third on the ladder. But I suppose that's sort of part of footy. You do need a little bit of luck when it comes to footy, and we were a little bit unlucky with timing of some injuries as well, early in the season when we were in that run of close losses. But I suppose the other part of that is it's something that we need to sort of learn from and try to build on, and make sure that when we're in those situations, we're actually closing those games rather than being on the wrong end of them. Because I mean, you can say we're a little bit unlucky, but if it's a bit of a pattern, it probably means it's something that we need to work on as well. But I still think with our new coach Andrew Pruin coming in for this season, we are well and truly on the right track. So even though it's a little bit frustrating how the season's gone, it does still feel like we're building towards what we ultimately want to achieve. And I mean, look, you never say never. We had a really good win last weekend against West Perth. I thought to beat them at Joondalup, which is their home ground. I don't think we've done that for 5 years. And it was Aaron Black's 250th game. So they would have had motivation, no doubt. And the boys did a really good job to get that win. So we might take that momentum into the back half of the season, and you never know. But yeah, to answer your question, I think disappointing definitely, but it does feel like we're building under Prui towards what we ultimately want to do.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And I remember going back and forth with Rick during each week. He's like, "Oh my God, it happened again." I remember in one of the Waffle podcasts, like every single game of the week was a Swans, because they came so close to winning or would win. So it's been a very interesting season for Swans this year. So it's been fun kind of riding the wave with Rick a little bit. So it's been fascinating. So I'm going to change this question just a littlest bit from the way I originally worded it, just because, again, we're kind of halfway through the year. But what do you think needs to happen for this season to be a success for Swans?
Well, obviously, probably the biggest one is it'll be nice for us to get some troops back. I think we're due to get a few players. We've got a bye this weekend at the time of recording, and we're due to get a few players back after the bye, which will no doubt help us. I think we have probably early in the season, because of the timing of some of the injuries, we probably had some guys who were thrown out of the position that they thought they'd be playing in at the beginning of the season. But I think we've got guys who are now settled a little bit more into positions. So I think that will help us going forward. with those guys consolidating their spots in those positions and maybe having a bit more momentum in those positions. And I think the other part of it is our reserve side is actually on top of the ladder and going really well. And we had a couple of young guys who came into the team for the game against West Perth and did a really good job. So I think the young guys and the guys playing in the reserves continuing to play good footy and put some pressure on to also keep pushing the guys who are playing league footy.
Yeah, definitely. And that's always a good thing too, is to look at it is I know that this season is been very frustrating, but to have that reserves group playing well is it does put a little bit of a scare into some of the senior guys because oh no, there's some kids coming up that may be good. So nothing but good for the footy club there. So as we kind of discussed, there's been some tough losses, but do you think those have been your biggest challenges this far? Is just the fact that not being able to finish games or not being able to finish in front of the big sticks?
Yeah, I think in some of those games, in particular, probably not taking our opportunity, like you just said, in front of the sticks. But I think we obviously review all of our games on a Monday, typically after a game, and there were definitely some clear lessons out of those close games in terms of things we could do, and also probably straying away from the game plan and what we wanted to do in key moments. So I think again, for younger guys playing, but for everyone as well, senior guys as well. Hopefully, it's a good lesson for us if we're put in those situations again. And to be honest, I think the game against West Perth, we were 10 points in front at three-quarter time, and we probably were in a situation where earlier in the year we might have actually lost a close game, being only 10 points in front at three-quarter time, and the opposition were actually kicking with the breeze in the last quarter. So I think a little bit of the lessons learned have already come to fruition, maybe in that recent win against West Perth, and we also won a close game with a kick after the siren against Perth a few weeks ago as well. So I like to think that guys are learning pretty quickly after experiencing that, and hopefully that'll hold us in good stead when we come into those situations again moving forward.
Definitely, for sure. And I hate going here, but unfortunately, as you kind of said earlier, and unfortunately, this injury may get you out of this season, which, like I said, I'm crossing my fingers it doesn't happen. But I'm always one of those. Do you have a goal for next season? If for any reason, and again, I don't hope this happens, that this season is lost, do you have a goal for next year? Is there something that you kind of put in the back of your head for, I want to be better at this going into next year?
Oh yeah, I think every year you sort of look at ways that you can improve. I suppose for myself, I prior to this injury happening, I sort of have had ongoing issues with my back as well, and that's been something that's cost me a bit of footy over the years. So personally for me, obviously I need to rehab this ankle injury, but at the same time I want to sort of take the opportunity to also try and sort my back out and probably put my body in a position to play all of next year without being impacted too much, and to therefore sort of have a platform to have a really strong season. And I suppose the other part of it is just wanting to, over the summer and into next season, is wanting to build on what we are trying to do in terms of how we want to play, how we want to go about it, the environment that we're creating, and sort of the standards that we're setting at the footy club, so that we can get closer to winning a premiership than we are right now. So yeah, that's probably the main thing heading into next year. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, like I said, hope speedy recovery and everything goes well. That next year we will get through a season with no times being off the pitch for sure. So I love this talking back and forth with Rick. And one of the things I loved was he said how kind of different the WAFL is. I mean, the AFL, you can't go on the ground. Security's going to tackle you, or in case like we saw at the Sydney Cricket Ground, you can run through and the security just chases you. So, which is always fascinating. So I think you have a little bit more of a connection with the fan bases at the state league level. So could you tell me about a fun fan interaction you've had so far in your career?
Yeah, that's a really tricky one to think of a specific fan interaction off the top of my head. But I will say that we have got I think Swan District's have got the best and biggest supporter base in the competition, in the WAFL competition. And I mean, every time you come off the ground, and particularly if you're winning at Bassendean, there's sort of a behind our interchange bench, there's sort of like a can bar. And every time you sort of come off, especially if you're going well, you sort of have guys yell out words of encouragement and to keep going and that kind of thing. So that's always pretty nice. It's to be honest, some of the best fan interaction I've probably seen is when the Swan District's supporters have been heckling an opposition player and the opposition player doesn't like it. And then one other thing I'll say in terms of fan interactions, it's not directly me, but there was one player in particular that used to play league footy at the football club, Tim Gape, and we also have a sort of a bar on the hill on the outer side at Bassendean where a lot of guys will go. And he a couple of times kicked goals from sort of the 50-meter line on the boundary right in front of that bar, and he would turn around and give it to the crowd and they would respond as well. So that's always pretty cool to see. Yeah.
Always fascinating hearing the hurling of abuse from the sidelines. Always fantastic. I absolutely love that. It's one of the things that it's fascinating to see sometimes, even on the AFL broadcast. And a fan reaches over and gives Max Gone crap, and he kicks a goal and kind of looks at the fan and does the arm extended. So I absolutely love it. It's absolutely classic to me. So I love hearing those stories. So we're gonna have a little bit of fun. As you said, you're sitting out, so you get a chance to watch these games. So I'm gonna have a little fun here. We're gonna install you as the Swan District's list manager. We're gonna have one time only, you can bring a player from another team on the WAFL into Swan Districts to maybe get you over the hump this year. Who's that one guy you would bring over to the black and white, and why?
Yeah, so if you're talking about one guy this year, and not someone that you sort of would build around in future years, that one guy that I mentioned earlier in the piece, Ben Sokol from Subiaco. I think it would definitely not hurt us having a forward of his caliber come into our team to give us a bit of firepower up forward. He's obviously a quality player. I was just trying to have a bit of a think. I was trying to think of a midfielder as well, but there's a couple of quality inside midfielders in the competition, so it's hard to sort of pinpoint one in particular. But if I had to pick one, or it'd be hard to go past someone like a Luke Meadows who plays for West Perth as well, who won the Simpson Medal as best on ground last year. But I mean, there's a lot of good inside midfielders. But yeah, they're probably the two areas I would target. Is looking at like a forward like Ben Sokol or an inside midfielder, and yeah, I don't think you could go wrong with someone like a Luke Meadows.
Oh, definitely. Always have time for that. So this is going to be fun. I love this question. I've heard this in a couple of podcasts before, and sometimes you might throw a teammate under the bus on this, but we're gonna see how this goes. So first teammate you think of after I say I'll give you a few topics. I want you to tell me the first teammate that you can think of after this. So of your teammates, who's the team dad? Who's the one keeping everybody in line?
Oh, I don't know. I could be wrong. Some would probably say I would be that person at times. I would definitely say I definitely would have said Tony Knott as well, but he lives down south in Bustleton and travels and plays out of Bustleton, so it's probably not up to him as well. Another our co-captain Chris Jones, he is a bit of a team dad in a different way in terms of he makes sure that everyone's keeping on the straight and narrow off field as well. So I would probably throw him in there too.
There's nothing wrong with that. Got to be sure everybody is ready to go. So, who's the funniest? Who's the one that you go to for the jokes?
Oh yeah, again, this is a really tough question because a lot of guys would lay claim to being the funniest. Oh yeah, I mean, in terms of who is actually the funniest, oh, I like I enjoy I enjoy Sebastian Bright's humor at times. So, and I know he, if I'll try and get him to listen to this, and he'll enjoy hearing that. So I'll throw Sebastian Bright in there.
I love it. All right. Who's the toughest? Who's the guy you don't want to meet in the back alley?
Oh, Jesse Glass McCasker would definitely lay claim to being that person. I think in terms of the way they play, and someone who would not back down. Jeb O'Donoghue, he actually started his WAFL career playing as a defender, but has moved into the midfield playing as a tagger. And I think if you watch the way he goes about his footy playing as a tagger, you'd be confident that he's not going to back down from anything.
There's nothing wrong. I love a good old fashioned tagger. Yeah, I love watching taggers sometimes because they're absolutely fascinating. So, social butterfly, who's the one everybody knows, everybody gets in contact when they want to have a good time?
Or I would say that again, the co-captain Chris Jones is right up there with that. He's pretty good at sort of catching up with everyone and being a Victorian recruit as well. One that flies under the radar a little bit, maybe, or a bit of a dark horse who enjoys a good time and does enjoy sort of getting around all the guys is Lockie Riley as well. So I'll mention him too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Who has the worst white line fever? Who's the one that you have to hold down from going nuts on the field?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to say for this one, there's a few in this category. I'm going to say Aiden Clark, who's a very good player, and I reckon he's very close, and we've had to make sure that he doesn't get into too many scraps or wrestle to save himself a fine or suspension. Yeah, I would say Aiden Clark. Yeah.
Love it. All right. Who's the quirkiest? Who's the most unique unit donning the black and white?
Oh, yeah. You could pick a couple here. Chris Jones, who I've mentioned a couple of times, but I would say in terms of the person where you never know what you're going to get, and I'm not sure he always knows what he's going to get with himself either, is Ryan Kemp. I'm going to say Ryan Kemp. Yeah.
All right. Who's the biggest ego? Who's the thinks the most of themselves on the team?
Oh, this is really throwing someone under the bus here. So someone who has developed a lot in the last year and is turned into a really good player and is continuing to turn into a good player is Tom Edwards. So I'm going to say that I'll throw him there. And the other one, and he won't mind me saying this because I actually really enjoy the way he goes about it as a result of this, is Jesse Glass McCasker. Yeah. Yeah,
Awesome.
he's pretty happy when he sort of struts around and he's not wearing a top too much of the time.
And the proverbial peacock always wanting to show
Yeah,
off. So
yeah.
already, and then last but not least, fashionably late. Who's the one showing just on time to team meetings?
Or I would say again, you could probably there's probably a couple of obvious ones, but one person I'm going to say who he's one of the nicest blokes you'll ever meet, and I reckon he just misses the alarm here and there, and maybe not so team meetings as much, but definitely recovery or something like that at times. But he does always show is Kian Ellers. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. And one thing that I've noticed, no matter what, no matter when where I've played footy or who I talk to, one of my favorite things is the nickname. The nickname at the club is always fantastic. The nickname game is always great. We're working on ours up here in Des Moines, but it's not always easy because we don't have any Australians. So, best nickname on the club.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Like, we've got a couple of good nicknames. Tony Knott is the original spaghetti because he's sort of long, he's tall and sort of skinny, so he's and lean, so he gets called spaghetti. One one uh guy one guy's come over from Victoria. He's Jesse Palmer is his name, and he gets called Chuka or Chicken. I'm
Mhm.
actually not 100% sure why, but yeah, he's Chuka. So that's another good one. And then the other one I'll mention is Tom Edwards, and to be honest, I've forgotten why he gets called this as well, but he's nicknamed Shifter, which I don't mind. I don't mind the sound of. Yeah.
Yeah, those fantastic, fantastic ones. So already, so many people that watch this podcast know I have not had the pleasure of coming to Australia. It is on my bucket list. I want to get out there. I'm like I said, I know it won't be cheap, but I want to try to get to as many footy games as possible. Trying to get out to WA. I know it's not easy with it being kind of out there compared to some of Australia. So I'm doing a little bit of research. I'm asking a couple of questions that when I go, I'm ready. So when you go to the footy as a patron, what's your go-to food at the footy?
Oh, it, not that I ever get the opportunity much while I'm playing to partake, but I couldn't go. I can't go past hot chips, to be honest. Like, you can get your pie or your sausage roll, but I can't go past some really good hot chips, and some canteens at some of the WAFL grounds have some really underrated hot chips on offer, no doubt.
You'd be surprised that that's actually the second most answer. Yeah, the
Yeah,
meat
okay.
pie and then the hot chips has been the two most set answers when I do this research. And then the other thing is when you go to the ground, say when you go to Optus Oval to watch your beloved Eagles, where is the ideal place for you to sit to watch the game?
Oh, well, if I had the choice, I would choose a corporate box to watch the game from where they provide food and drink. But otherwise, I probably enjoy sitting on, like, I would enjoy sitting on the wing, um, mostly, if I could pick. So you're sort of in the middle of the ground, and I actually would, rather than being on the lowest level, I would probably choose being in one of the front rows on the top level, so that you're sort of at the front of that second level. So you've got a little bit of a bird's eye view of the ground as well, but from the wing. I think that'd be the best vantage point. Probably a similar position on the ground to where the coaches' boxes are. But if there were seats, like there were just general seats near there, yeah.
It's been a very popular answer is on the wing, that second level, so then you can kind of see everything. Again, very popular answer, and I love it. That's been the one that I almost want to sit behind the goals just because you can see the movement and kind of the structures of everything. It gets the coaching a little bit of me since I coach up here. I want to see that because you don't get it in the broadcast. You get the side on, which I mean is good, but only if you're following the footy. You can't see the movement of how the defenders follow the footy across the field, different things like that. So I'm hoping one day. And then the last question that I ask, and this is for me, I'm starting a list because some of the things I've been told is absolutely fantastic. Favorite game of footy you have ever seen live at the ground, on telly, men's, women's, doesn't matter. Favorite game of footy you have ever seen.
Yeah, I can't. And as an Eagles supporter, and the way it turned out, I can't go past the 2018 AFL Grand Final between
Mhm.
Eagles and Collingwood. We myself and my brother and a couple of mates actually took the gamble of booking some packages halfway through the season when Eagles made a good start. And I think they lost 3 games in a row immediately after we booked those tickets and the package for accommodation. So we were a bit nervous, but it all obviously turned out perfectly. And then I have to also mention that's followed very closely by the 2010 WAFL Grand Final between Swans and Claremont, which I got no doubt Rick's mentioned
Mhm.
before when speaking to you. That was an incredible game to watch live, just because of the how close it was, and also the quality of it as well. Yeah.
Definitely. I know Rick. I think Rick told me it's on YouTube. It's something that I've got in my queue that I want to watch. I just haven't. I want to be able to sit down and watch it. And a lot of right now my YouTube is not there. But that was definitely one that he had specifically said. And then I always think it's funny with 2018 is Mason Cox, the American, kind
Yeah.
of got a lot of the people over here in the States with the USAFL huge for that grand final. Most of us became Collingwood supporters. It was nothing against the Eagles, but it was the fact the American had a chance to win a final. But it was an absolutely incredible grand final, still one of my favorites to ever watch. It was fantastic. So, Brandon, that is it. That is everything that I have. This has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. Again, the situation for us coming together a little bit less than ideal, but I do genuinely appreciate you being able to sit down and having a chat with me today.
Yeah, no worries, Donnie. I like we were saying before we started recording. I think it's awesome with the following and sort of what you've got happening over there in the States and your knowledge and enthusiasm for the game. And speaking to you sort of came out and was really apparent. So no, I appreciate you having me on, and hopefully I can share it on social media streams over here and maybe try and encourage a couple of other of our players to maybe jump on. No, so I appreciate you having me on in the chat.
Not a problem at all. And I always tell this to a lot of people is that I'm not the only one. There's actually four US based podcasts that cover the AFL and the AFLW. Right now, I'm the only one that covers the state league. So I have that little bit of niche a little bit, and I tend to cover the women a little bit more than some of my counterparts. But there's a gentleman out of Ohio called Craig Wessels who does the Yank on the Footy. There's two brothers out of California, the Castle brothers, that do Americans Watching the Footy, or WTA, WTF. And then a young lady out of New York with the AFL Obsessed podcast. So surprisingly, there's a lot of us over there's a fair few of us over here that love the sport of footy. But I genuinely appreciate the kind words. It's always so much fun. And again, I fell in love with this sport. I've become a footy head, as I've kind of told a few people. I'm up at 4:50 in the morning to watch the Swans, or staying up till midnight to watch the Samfel W Grand Final. So I love the game of footy. I love trying to help spread it over here, whether it's coaching, whether it's doing the podcast. But in all, I just love the Aussie spirit, and I love meeting so many people that enjoy this sport too. It's been fantastic. So genuinely appreciate it. And my other thing too is try to share it with other teams, because I'd love to make contacts with more waffle clubs, because right now don't have as many contacts and would love to do some more stuff with the waffle. The Sandful surprisingly has been fantastic for me, and I want to be able to share that love for all of the state leagues as much as I can. So that is going to do it, ladies and gentlemen, for our podcast. Again, keep an eye out. More footy coverage coming, hoping for some more player interviews, and obvious VFL, Sandful, Waffle, and of course AFL and AFLW reviews coming up very, very soon. That'll do it for Donnie's Disposals. We will see you again very, very soon.